Hi everyone and welcome to Detective Tuesdays, where every single week we come on live to answer your questions. Or if you're not here to ask questions, then I'll talk about something myself. So today as I'm checking out on everybody, nobody's posted up any questions yet. Just double check that. So I lied. If you guys have questions, feel free to go over into the comments on the Zoom meeting and list out your questions, whatever you've got. Today, my topic that I'm planning on going over is string replacement, and specifically string replacement on Wittner Pegs. If you guys haven't discovered Wittner Pegs, oh my goodness, you guys have really got to figure out what these are. They are a fantastic addition to any string instrument. If we've ever had problems tuning pegs and getting those things to turn or move or break, or they get stuck or they slip too much, Wittner Pegs really is a great answer to that. So I'm going to go over those today if you guys don't have any questions. If you do, feel free to throw them up in the chat, or better yet, break every single Zoom rule in the entire world, turn your camera on, turn your microphone on, and simply just ask. Because sometimes, I'm always deaf, but sometimes I get a little involved in what I'm doing and not paying attention to the computer I've got over there that's actually running the Zoom. So feel free to just unmic and shout out any questions. All right, so today we're going to start looking at Wittner pegs and what they are. And Wittner pegs are a mechanical peg that actually has a 6-to-1 gear ratio inside of it. So as we turn the peg, remarkably easy to move the string and make any changes that we need to the string. They are a really fantastic way to do any of that fine tuning mechanism. So where we normally have fine tuners built into the instrument on the tailpiece, you can get rid of all of those, increase the vibration length of the string, which is going to make your instrument sound more full, bigger, and stronger, and instead put all that fine-tuned capability right up at the peg. So today, this particular instrument, this is the Concertmaster of the Southwest Symphony's violin. We're going to replace the set of strings on this one for her and get this one going. So here, let's go take a look. So when we're looking at the pegs, because they're geared and they're not direct, so if we look real close, if you can see, and let's try to get you a different camera view here. If you look at, let's go with the E string here. Sorry guys, look at that set. If we look at this string and I'm turning the peg around, if you look inside the gearbox, you'll notice that the string doesn't move nearly as much. So what we need to do is we use a peg winder. It's a little bit easier to get the pegs, the strings undone this way, is we simply use this peg winder and take our strings off this way. This may be the one downside to Wittner pegs, which is changing strings. They are a little bit more complicated to change a string simply because of the gear mechanism. It's a lot like a string bass, where it just takes a little bit more attention and love to get those strings to come out. But with one of these peg winders, it's really quite simple. Sometimes if we're lucky, we can get the strings to pop out of the peg hole, but we're not being that lucky on this one. Now a lot of people say, all right, pegs, or it's winding a string around a peg is no big deal. And it's not that big a deal, except it can make a humongous difference in the way that your wood peg functions. In other words, if we string that up on the too close to the edge of the peg box, you can actually lock a peg up and make the peg freeze and not move anywhere. You can also, if you string it too close to the center, you can make the peg slip a lot to where it won't sit very well. But if we set the string coming off of the peg up to the nut in the right position, then you can make your peg function a lot better. And that's what I want to really concentrate on and show you on today. Whether this is a Wittner peg or a wood peg, it doesn't matter. If we're looking at if we're doing this correctly, that same string placement will affect the way your pegs will actually function. So we've got this last string coming off on this one here real quick. All right, so real simply, I'm going to change this camera view here. If we get all the strings off of our instrument, drop the bridge off, make sure that the tailpiece doesn't come smack the instrument, and then just get rid of your old pegs. When we're doing Wittners, the pegs don't slide in and out of the instrument the way a wood peg does. And so it's a lot easier to restring it when you're working your way up the pegs. So I always do it from the lowest peg up to the highest peg, next and next. And I work my way up that way. That way I've got full access to the string, so I can rewind the string any way I want to. Other question people always ask me is, what strings should I use? Now, that is a complicated answer. And mostly in whatever that, and my answer is always whatever the instrument needs. In other words, if you've got an instrument that is really bright and nasally, so if the instrument's just tinny as all get out, and nasally sort of sound quality, and we're trying to get that to be a blendable sound quality, so I want to be able to blend into the entire ensemble, I need a darker string on that instrument to help it come down, get out of that nasalness, get out of that brightness, and add a little bit more color to it in order to make the instrument sound like it can actually blend. But the opposite is true if you've got an instrument that is a really dark and heavy, lush sound, or a thick, heavy sound, and we need to brighten that sound quality up in order to get it to blend, then I need to put on a string with a brighter sound quality. And there's charts out there and guides out there. I've got one in the emergency repair guide. That's free. If you want, go over to repairmasterclass.com and get the emergency repair guide. I've got a string guide in there that shows what strings fit that criteria, what's brighter, what's darker, what's a little bit more focused, and what's a little bit more, I don't want to say fuzzy, but a little bit more broad in its color spectrum, in order to help that box, whatever it sounds like, have a more blendable sound. All right, so what I've got is I've got these strings out. I'm going to zoom this in so you can see this a little bit better and find where that is at. And I'm going to string this up, starting out at the bottom string on the G string. And I'm sliding it through. Wittner pegs have two sets of holes on them, and you can choose which one you want depending on your wrapping. Basically, it's how far it's been installed. So I pulled a little too much string out on that one, so I'm going to start over. I'm going to add just a little bit more string so it slides through just like any wood peg. So I've got a little bit of a tail sticking out there, and then wrap it across right here. I'm going to show us on this other camera what that looks like. You can see that string wrap, how it goes across. I'm coming out of the tang where it comes through the peg right here. And as soon as that comes back around, I'm going to cross that string back over and continue to wrap my strings. Notice here I'm holding the tension at the peg. So I've got it installed at the tailpiece down here, but I'm also holding the tension here so everything wraps up nice and pretty. String winding is one of the very few places in the world where pretty actually counts, but it does count here. I want my strings to wrap up really nice and tight on themselves. I want them to be working their way over just slowly as can be, so they're right, nice and clean. And I'm going to be dragging this over. Now what I want is I don't want the string to come into the nut coming right off the center, nor do I want the string coming, being wrapped up to where it's all bunching up against itself over on this side where I'm winding it at, over here. I want it to come off where there is a little bit more than a string and a half worth of distance between the inside of the peg box and the string coming off up to the nut. And when it does, when I've set my strings up that way, it's going to reduce the amount of sticking on a peg, whether it's a Wittner peg or a wood peg, it doesn't matter. It's going to reduce the amount of sticking that I get. If I strung it up where it was too tight in the middle and coming straight off, I'm going to end up with a lot of loose pegs and slipping pegs. Now the other thing that we do is I'm going to take the bridge and a good old number 2 pencil. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to actually mark up and add a little bit of carbon onto each one of the notches. What the carbon or the pencil lead does is it creates a lubricant and helps that string slide across the bridge as we're tuning it. Anytime we're tuning it, we're dragging the strings up this direction as we're wrapping them around the peg. And that string has to slide across the bridge. Now I also want to do the exact same thing here at the nut. So I'm going to put some carbon in each one of these string slots here. I'm just going to move this one out of my way for a second. And then right now I'm going to go ahead and set my bridge back up. Helps me put the bridge on the right way. Just so I can start tensioning these guys up. And and I'll come back in and add the rest of the tension later. Now, because these are Wittners, I'm going to go to the E-string peg next. If I can find the E-string. And put it on. Now, a lot of your strings will come with a little bridge protector. This particular instrument has a bridge wrap on it already, so I'm actually going to just remove this guy. That's right, Ava's are hard to get off of over the silk wrapping, so I'm actually going to cut it off. There we go. Get that guy off of here, and we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to line this up so you can actually see it. I'm going to get this hooked up at the tailpiece, and I'm going to choose which hole to put through. Because it's the E string, I'm going to put it through on the second hole and make it a little bit easier for me, because the string's so thin it's not going to take up very much space. So I'm going to start coming around. Sorry, I'm bouncing on this guy a little bit. And this is where I'm going to make sure that that is wrapped real nice and tight right up against there, and then cuts across. And locks that string in. Now my string is already popped off, so I'm going to reset it. Keep my tension right in here. This again is pretty counts here, so I'm going to tension this thing up. I'm used to doing this right up against my body, not on camera. So if your strings ever slide around like mine are right now, I'm just going to use my pencil, slide them over a little bit. No big deal. And wind these up. Now as I'm getting closer to where I want that string, notice I'm going to slide the string over just a little bit and start opening that wrap up so that that string comes off the peg about where I want it as I'm tensioning it up. It's a good question, Brian. Do strings age and replaced even when they're not played at all? And the answer is yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, strings have a ticking time bomb to them. You notice like this Ava Prazzi set, it has just this plastic cover to it and these paper packages. Other string manufacturers are starting to notice that they need to package their strings sealed, and they're coming in hermetically sealed packages where there's no air inside the package. And what that's doing is that's reducing the amount of reducing the time bomb from ticking. As soon as you crack that sucker open and start allowing air to interact with the high-end metals that are in bowed strings, then the bomb is starting to tick. And you've got, depends on the string, anywhere from 4 months to 12 months worth of time before that string needs to be replaced. And now, I know that sounds a lot like Jiffy Lube saying you're supposed to change your oil every 3,000 miles or 3 months, whatever comes first. That might be a little too frequent for some people. So I think I can get my car very safely at 5,000 miles and have no problems or engine performance difference at all. So on strings, we end up with a very similar thing. How long can I actually make this last? Well, the string manufacturers say 122 hours. I don't know where they came up with 122, but they came up with, most string manufacturers agree that at about 122 hours of playing, the string is pretty much dead. That doesn't mean that it's broken or that it's falling apart or it won't work. It simply means that it's not tuning correctly anymore, that it's not maximizing the vibrations anymore, that a lot of your sound quality and sound production is gone. And where we start to hear that more than anything else is what I call false tuning. You know, when you start tuning your string just a little bit, you're needing to add a little bit sharper, and it jumps 15 to 80 cents or a step and a half sometimes even. But then you move it back just a little bit of a hair, and it drops all the way back down. What's happening is the string is tensioning only over this section of the string. And then and it jumps up in pitch and it gets really sharp. But then that tension starts to relax over across the string, and the pitch falls back down flat again. And that's where it gets really hard to get that thing to just sit in on pitch. That's an indicator that, yeah, your strings are dead. The other major indicator is overtones. When we're trying to do harmonics and play, where we're fingering softly on the string and it pops that harmonic out, those get really, really hard to do on a set of dead strings. So what I have found is normally about 150 to 180 hours depending on the set of strings. If it's a high tension string like this Ava Perazzi set here, then it's going to be on that shorter side. It's going to be in that closer to that 130 to 150 hours worth of playing, and then it's done. So you figure if a student is playing an hour a day, that's in class and at home practice if we're lucky, then you've got 6 months in a set of strings like this. Or if you've got a set of dominant strings, which is not a high tension, it's a medium to medium low tension string, then you've got that higher 180 to 200 hours worth of play. So for a lot of players, that's an entire year worth of playing because they're just not playing that much. So 200 hours, that's an hour every day for 3/4 of a year. That's pretty average for an entire year of what an average student is going to be playing. So you've got somewhere in that 4 months to 12 months, depending on the tension of the string. Does that make sense? If it does, shout out, let me know. But yeah, they need to be changed on a regular basis, even if they are not broken. It's amazing how many players will come in and have me redo their strings and just be blown away. Oh my gosh, it sounds so good. Well, when was the last time you changed your strings? I'll ask. Oh, I don't know, it's probably been 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it's going to sound a whole lot better then when we're doing this. All right, so you notice how I've got the G string, the E string, the D string all tuned up and wrapped up because now I've got access and I don't have to go across any of these strings. You don't necessarily have to do this with wood pegs because you've got the ability to slide the peg out and you can access the hole that the string goes through. But on a set of Wittner pegs, you don't have that ability. They don't slide out nearly as easily. They will slide out, but nowhere near as easily. And so you've got, it becomes a lot more difficult to do this unless we're doing them up the strings, up the pegs like this. And if you do, then this takes almost all the frustrations of a Wittner peg out and gives you nothing but the benefit. So I'm just leaving the tension at my fingers as best as possible until I get it placed in the bridge and at the nut. And I bring that tension back up. And from here, I'm just going to tune the instrument just like normal. I'm deaf and on camera, so I'm going to throw a tuner on it. And it allows us to really dial in just any amount of tuning. I was chicken, didn't put very much tension on these to start off with. All right, so let's listen to this. I'm down in a C sharp. I'm right in tune in a C sharp. And if you watch the fingers here, I'm going to bring it up into that D. And you've seen how far I have to move that peg in order to get it just that half step. Where with a wood peg, a half step is, less than a quarter of a turn. It's really hard to get those senses, that 5 to even 2 cents worth of change, almost impossible to get it at the peg. Not impossible, but really difficult. With Wittner pegs, it's just stupid easy. And you can imagine with a set of cello pegs, if you've got this much tunability and function in a set of pegs, how much easier it is. Now, what does this do to the classroom? This gives you as the teacher not just a minute or two, but if all of your instruments had a working set of pegs or Wittner pegs in them, if every instrument in the room had them, you'd tune your entire ensemble in less than 4 minutes. Because 2 things would happen. 1, you could tune them much faster, and 2, your students could do almost all the tuning. Because even if they crank that peg, the most it's going to go is a half step, and that's not going to break a string. Where if they crank that peg with a wood peg, you're going to break a string. So you're far less worried about it. You can start teaching students how to tune their own. much, much faster. So they're a remarkable tool that way. All right, I'm gonna check in on the notes here. All right, so 2 questions. The first one is, when I take all the strings off, am I worried about the sound post falling over? And the answer is no. I've been doing this for 27 years now. Very, very seldomly does the sound post ever fall over. Does it happen? Yeah, it happens, but not very often. The amount of push down the strings have is tremendous on the top of the instrument. But if the sound post is cut right, then it's not going to fall over, and it's not hardly even going to move. So even when we release the tension and that top and back separate, some people are worried that the sound post is going to fall over and in. It has been my experience that I don't see hardly any of that, at least in our dry desert area where we are, and there's not a lot of flex in the instruments. Maybe if I was sitting in Seattle, where it rains all the time and I'm always at above 60% humidity, maybe I'd be worried about it a little bit more, but not a tremendous amount. If the sound post does drop over, one of the things I'm always going to do is measure the sound post after I get tension back on the instrument and see if it's too much, or too short. See if the sound post is too short. More than likely, it's an indicator that the sound post is 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters too short, and I actually need to replace it, because sound post material also shrinks, just the way the top and back do as well. So yeah, I'm worried about it, but not enough to keep me from only changing one string at a time, sort of thing. The other question that we had is, are these different than guitar tuners? So they look different, and yeah, they're a lot different. Let me grab you a model here. This is, try to get that more focused here. There we go. This is a model of a Wittner Pegs, and it has a clear head so we can see the gear tuning of what's happening inside there. So there's gears that are making this move, and so only the inside of the peg is spinning. This portion right here, and underneath the scroll and through the peg box, is not turning at all. Only the section inside is turning. Where on a guitar machine head, the entire thing spins. This entire shaft would spin as it works on a worm gear. So yeah, they're a different mechanism entirely. It's not working on a direct worm gear. This is working on a geared mechanism. There's actually 3 gears in there that are working on it. And they tune at I want to say a 30-to-1 ratio. So it takes 6 times. You have to turn the peg over, so a half a turn, that's all content is 1. It takes 6 of those, so 3 times all the way around, in order to get the hole in the middle of the peg box to spin once. So it allows you just a tremendous amount of tuning. Really, really easy to use on the instrument, just phenomenal that way, but the only downside to them is it takes a little bit longer to change your strings. But you notice, even with me talking all the way and trying to do this on camera, it didn't take me very long to change the strings at all. And now we've got this instrument set back up, and the player will be able to tune with remarkable ease forever. The crank guy, so Wittner makes these, and it's designed to actually fit and snap directly onto, you can't see this. So this one's designed to actually snap onto the peg, that way it doesn't fall off when you're tuning. If you push on it and crank on it, it'll still pop out of there, but it makes it easier to tune. You can also use any guitar tuner. If I just grab a normal guitar tuner, I can stick it on here and it will work and function and move that string just fine. It's just more wobbly, where this one's a little bit more stable. And the peg winder, I think, I'd have to look it up, but they're not that expensive. They're completely worth the investment, whatever they are. I think it's under 20 bucks. So really easy to get one of these peg winders and add it into the arsenal. All right, guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. If you've got any questions at all, feel free on live sessions to always come and join me and come with your questions. Turn your camera on and say, hey, this is broken. How do I fix this? Great, let's put my project aside and let's work on yours. I'd rather get your instruments up and running. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to email me at steve@repairmasterclass.com and ask me your question. If you want, you can always come over and check out on our website at repairmasterclass.com. We've got a hands-on session coming up April 7th through 9th. That is the orchestra session. It is 3 days of intensive but super fun work where you're working side by side with me in the shop, and we're having just a great time. You can also check out live stream sessions at the top. Live stream sessions are where we can come into you you personally or your entire district if you want to, and we can train you on any sort of repair technique that you want. There are suggestions online underneath the live stream section of some topics that we can talk about, or you can come to me and say, hey, I want to learn about this. Fine, let's talk about that. So both of those are out there available for you guys if you ever have any questions. It's part of what Repair Masterclass does, is I want to teach you how to fix your own instruments. So you guys, if you have any other questions, drop them in the chat. If not, I'll see you next Tuesday.